Finally, what you've all been waiting for. It is time to go through and check in on some of the Sabres prospects. That's coming up with Hadi Kalakeche from Locked On NHL Prospects here on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
Your Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. All right, we're between games, which means it is the perfect time for a look at the Sabres prospects. Joe DiBiase joined by one of our favorites, Hadi Kalakeche from Locked On NHL Prospects. We both got sick, so this is like 2 weeks later than we wanted it to be, but we made it. We made it.
We did, absolutely. COVID got me, then something got you, and then
I
there we
still
are.
don't know. I still don't know what got me. It's nice to have someone else on the show, though. I can actually take a drink of water in between during segments here, which is nice.
Absolutely.
Still not all the way over it.
Yeah,
but
I got my swimming pool over here, so we're good.
Beautiful. We're ready to go. We're ready to go on. Listen, I love talking prospects, and it's always funny to me that, of the shows we do, these are always like the most popular. And hey, a hockey team on a 13-year playoff drought, the future sometimes can sound a little brighter than the present, which I guess might, equate to why that happens.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And especially for the Sabres, I mean, you guys have amassed just a glut of fantastic prospects. So yeah, I'm excited to get on and talk about those.
We'll go through them. We're going to talk about some of the guys on the team right now, including Zach Benson. We're going to go through some of the guys that performed really well at the World Juniors, and we'll get it all in here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. If you want to follow Hadi on Twitter, at Hadi, Hadi, the letter K _ scouting, to check out his content. Always good stuff, especially during the World Juniors, which wrapped up about a week ago. And Team USA got it done. I always like when they do it against Canada, but it's okay. They did it against Sweden this go round. So another gold medal in the U.S.'s pocket. On that real quick, we're going to get to some of the Sabre guys and then some of the Sabre players at the World Juniors. But the tournament overall, not a surprise at all that the Americans won it.
No, not at all. When you've got an elite prospect such as Quentin Musty sitting at home while Team USA goes and wins gold, gives you a good idea of what's going on there. But yeah, I mean, I think USA wanted to face off against Sweden more than Canada this time, actually, because I don't know if it was the U18 Worlds or the Helinka Gretzky Cup, but Sweden won against them, and it was feisty in that one. And yeah, I'm sure this one felt really, really good for Team USA. And I mean, overall, they had a fantastic roster. I mean, unmatched in this tournament. Like there was just layer after layer of elite offensive talent in this group. And what I like that USA did is they just went with the best players they had and then figured out the tactics and structure from there. Whereas what Canada did and what led them to not even make the medal rounds was they had their structure in mind and then they picked players that fit with that. And I think that USA's mindset on that was fantastic. They did a great job with the roster.
Yeah, we'll get into some more of the Sabre guys coming up. But let's kick things off, though, here with what's going on with the Sabres in general. So it's not necessarily going well for the team overall. This was supposed to be a team that missed the playoffs by 1 point last year, would take even somewhat of a jump, just end this forsaken dozen-year playoff drought that's about to probably hit 13 this year. But what about some of the younger guys? You were super high on him, and as stunned as I've been that this season has progressed and Zack Benson has looked as good as he has. And honestly, let's rewind, Hadi. Him making the team as a 13th overall pick, 18 years old, you don't typically see that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the only 4 2023 prospects playing in the NHL right now are the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 13th overall picks. I mean, that's a testament to how good Zack Benson has been and how translatable his game into the NHL. We were talking just before the podcast. It feels like every decision he makes is the right one. It feels like everything he does is the right thing that you should be doing in that situation. And, I've said it time and time again with Zack Benson, his size does not limit him. he compensates for size exactly the way you want a prospect to when they're 5'10", 180 pounds and not the best skater. He leans into checks. He protects pucks with his leg, with his right leg, while leaning on the player. On the forecheck, he is fantastic. I mean, his effort level is off the charts. He wins battles on his own, retrieves pucks, cycles them up, moves off the puck. Like, every single detail that he has in his game is tailor-made for the NHL. And yeah, I mean, for me, watching him in his draft year, I thought if any player drafted outside the top 10 is going to make the NHL, it was going to be him. And the other player was Felix Ungersorum, who was cut at the last day for Carolina. So that's 2 for 2 there.
Yeah, he it is amazing. The other night against or day I should say against Vancouver, him shielding 6'8" Tyler Myers as he goes to the net and like not letting Myers push him off the puck. That's contact balance, right? Like that is edge work, that is skating. That he has. That's not strength. Impressive.
Yeah. That's not strength. That's hockey sense. It's knowing exactly how to compensate for your lack of size. I don't care if you're 6'3" or 6'4", 6'5". We're talking about a 6'8", 215-pound defenseman. Like, this is no slouch in Tyler Myers. And at 5'10", 180, Zack Benson comes out with the puck. Like, it's what he does.
Yeah. So does anything about his season, I mean, he's playing well night to night. Like, to me, he's consistent. Don Granato now is trusting him to play on the penalty kill. And like importantly play in the penalty kill, like first or second unit usually. The offensive numbers are fine. They're not, crazy. I don't know how much to expect from him on that front, but does anything he's doing this year change your opinion on what his ceiling is as a player, like long term?
Not at all. This is a player who I said it on your morning show right after he was drafted, might just be the best playmaker out of this draft. The playmaking ability, I don't think it's even taken that step yet, and it can. He's not having as many opportunities to show it off, but when he gets going, when he's able to move the puck, when he's got time and space, and he's able to find those little pockets of space, which he will continue to do, he's able to thread needles. He's able to choose the right pass for every scenario. Like, when the scenario requests an area pass off of him, he'll do it. If it requires a slip pass or a tip pass or a hook pass or any type of pass that you could think of, Zack Benson has in his arsenal. It takes some getting used to, especially in your first year in the NHL as an 18-year-old, undersized, not good skating prospect. It takes some time to warm up to the idea that, hey, I have a bit more time and space than I think. I think he's still getting used to that. But as soon as he does, it's game over for this league. I mean, he's got the talent for it.
Yeah. I almost even mean, too, I liked where you took that question. I almost meant, like, is his ceiling higher than maybe we even thought? Like, what is it? Like, I don't want to go too crazy here, but like, are we dreaming of a guy that could become like a 90-plus point player?
I don't know about 90 points. I'm thinking more of the Mark Stone brand of player, where he's going to get you around a point a game, usually less, but it's going to be so impactful for your team that it's going to allow your other more skilled players to score above a point per game. I'm thinking of Matthew Savoie, Jiri Kulich, Noah Ostlund, even short term, Casey Middlestat and Tage Thompson and those guys. Like, he can give them the floor in order to get more puck touches and better quality areas and find them wherever on the ice. This is a type of player that just uplifts the skill set of every single player he plays with, and that's priceless. That's more important than scoring 90 points or 100 points or 120 points individually. The fact that he's able to uplift everyone he plays with, that's priceless.
Yeah, and that is good because the Sabres have a lot of young talent, but especially the guys on the NHL roster right now, not everybody is the best two-way player. Just the full, length of the ice. One guy that I wanted to actually toss in real quick, the Sabres have a lot of young players. I don't even know who to label a prospect anymore because it'd be the whole team, basically. One guy, though, that is kind of broken out this year is JJ Peterka. And I want to hear you on him a little bit because he's shooting a lot more that I have noticed. And last year, it felt like he was trying to be more of a playmaker. But, man, when he gets ahead of steam, it is a sight to see. He can disappear for a few games at a time, but where are you at on him? Because he's, right around he's just below a 30-goal pace for the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with Peterka, I think this is more or less what you're going to get out of him long term. The type of player who's going to score you a decent amount of goals, going to go to the right areas and make plays overall. I mean, I remember he was one of the first prospects I ever did a scouting report on. And Yeah, Peterka,
Yeah.
what I saw from him in his draft here in Germany, I mean, we're talking about a player who is so reliable, defensively responsible, really smart on the puck. Um, but, you look at his toolkit and you don't see necessarily a standout offensive trait. With Zack Benson, you can point to the playmaking and be like, oh, that's his ticket. That's his ticket to a point per game. With Peterka, I don't see that yet, and maybe it develops, but I'd be surprised at this stage. Overall, I think he's a fantastic middle six option with defensive
Mhm.
upside, with a decent amount of offensive upside. I think 30 goals is realistic and reasonable.
Yep.
He's just below that pace right now, but I think with the mindset of shooting a lot more, which was something that he developed over time,
Mhm.
he could get there. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'd expect similar in the range of 50 to 60 points annually from Peterka, something like that,
Mhm.
especially if he's playing with the likes of Benson, Middlestat, Thompson. Like, as long as those stay his kind of range of teammates, we're good.
Yeah, yeah, he's been with Cousins and Quinn, I know a lot, and I
Yeah,
think they maybe see that as a long-term line, but you know how lines work. Well, in a day they could mix that up and
absolutely.
shuffle things.
Yeah.
The last guy I wanted to touch on with you before we get to some of the World Junior guys, not yet in the Sabres organization, or at least not in the NHL club. Devon Levi. We talked a lot about him last season.
Yeah.
How do you see his season going? And when you look at the numbers and really in general, just the hype got crazy. And I was always on the more pessimistic side of that. There
Yeah.
were those in the Buffalo, not just the media, but fans in general too, that thought, oh, this guy, launch him to 50 plus starts. He's our number one goalie. And I still think he's the number one goalie of the future. But man, my hesitation on that, Hadi, was just you never, ever see that.
Yeah.
In rare instances like Connor Hellebuck.
Yeah, absolutely. It's extremely rare for young goaltenders to come into this league and immediately just take the starter spot by the reins and make it theirs. I mean, you look historically, there's a lot of goaltenders that take a lot of time, and goalies usually take a bit longer in order to hit their ceiling. So I wouldn't be surprised if Devon Levi by 24, 25, 26 is an elite goaltender in this league. He has the skill set, and more importantly, he's compensated for his size a bit like Zach Benson, exactly the way you need to, except for him, it's in goal. The way he covers his net, the way that he moves post to post, his ability to just go from really high up above his crease to right at the goal line really, really quickly. Those are little details on his game that I love, and I think long term you can make those work. But obviously, right now, 19 games, 3.32 goals against average, 889 save percentage. That's not the numbers of an elite goaltender. But again, he's super young, and it's so rare for goaltenders to say should make it in the NHL and immediately be impactful. So I'm still really hopeful with Levi. I love, love, love his game. Everything about what he does in goal. I want to send clips of him to every small goaltender in the world and just be like,
Yeah.
this is how you play when you're undersized. He does it really well. So I'm still holding out on Devon Levi and hoping that he can make it work because he definitely has a skill set for it.
Yep. Plenty of time for him to develop into that true number one. And in Buffalo's favor, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen has progressed this year. He's not
Yeah,
amazing, but he's definitely on a heater lately, to say the least.
for
All right.
sure.
Time out here. When we come back, let's go through some of the guys not yet in the Buffalo club, especially what they did at the World Juniors, including Noah Ostlund, who Hadi was higher on last year than I think anybody that I talked to leading past the Sabres draft from last year. That's coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast is presented by Game Time. You should not have to worry about where to buy tickets to your next big event, maybe even your next snow-filled event. You got a big football game coming on Sunday with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets, last-minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals. With zone deals, you pick the section and Game Time picks the seats for big time savings. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. My favorite feature, you get to see the view from your seat before you buy. You're scrolling through, looking through sections, looking through rows, and you don't have to guess at what your angle will be or how high up you're going to be. You're going to get to see it with a visual representation on the app. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code Locked On for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. Joe DiBiase, Hadi Kalakeche. Follow him on Twitter at HadiK_scouting. Thanks for making us your first listen. Your next listen should be Locked On Sports Today, here for your 24/7, covering the top stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. Subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. I'm sure they're talking plenty of Bills Steelers today for you Sabres/Bills fans. Let's get back into Sabres prospect land. All right, let's go away from what people are seeing with the Sabres. The World Juniors, and I guess we could use their whole development season in general. I want to start with you with Noah Ostlund from Sweden. How well he played. It was really my first chance to watch him for like an entire game at a time. And to me, he looked very impressive, slick, like the hands. I didn't think he had hands like that. But you've been high on him all along. So I'm guessing you're not that surprised that he had a tournament that
Absolutely. Strong. I mean, if I were to use one word to describe Ostlund, it's wriggly. He just wriggles out of space really, really well. He just moves past checks almost like he's covered in butter. It's so fun to watch. But yeah, overall, I mean, you're talking about a player who, for me, was the best player on Sweden in that. I mean, him and Axel Sandin Peterka, which was the pretty much the top defenseman on Sweden, were the two standouts for me. And Ostlund, despite Jonathan Lekkerimäki, his line mate, earning the MVP of the tournament. Yeah. I thought Lekkerimäki was a lot more unidimensional than Ostlund. Ostlund was getting back on back check, was making plays defensively, was using his skating in all three zones in order to get involved, and more importantly, was distributing the puck a whole lot. He was making plays in transition that were really, really impressive. And this season he's playing with Seavoy in the SHL, and he's got 10 points in 19 games, which is not too bad for a 20-year-old. I mean, this is a player who definitely has the upside to become one of the best players on an already stacked and future heavy Buffalo Sabres team. I still think that there's a spot for him in the top 6. Like that's not unrealistic for me.
Yeah. What do you see timeline for him as a refresher for those? Is it about the same? Again, I'm even trying to refresh myself or recall what you would have been on for him. But what do you think? Like another year, 2 years before we even start thinking about him getting to the NHL level?
I'd say if next year is in the AHL, I'd say half a year next year, and then he's in the NHL. But if he's still playing in Sweden next year, you just delay that by another year. So half a year in the SHL, in the AHL, another year, and the rest of the year in the NHL. He has a skill set for it. He has the abilities. I don't think he's going to hop into the NHL off rip and just tear it up. I think it's a really smart idea to ease him into the North American game, to ease him into the smaller ice game, and give him opportunities to get touches in ways he wouldn't usually. And I think the World Juniors were great for that. Despite the fact that it's larger ice, it's a bit of the similar kind of chaotic, high-paced play style in the World Juniors. You get puck touches, but you get them with pressure. You get them for short amounts of time. And more of that, I think, is going to do wonders for Ostlund's game. So, depending on if he plays in the SHL next year or not, either way, half a year in the AHL after that, and then the NHL.
It's another reason there are Sabre fans that want to see some trades happen, in part because they've already got so many young players like loaded in their top 6 and top 9, really. And they've got all these guys coming, and like, there's no room for all these guys. Like, someone's got to go at some point. That 2-for-1 trade, it seems inevitable. And here's another guy that seems to be on the way to making it. What about quickly his line mate for part of the tournament, his teammate in Anton Wahlberg? Anything stand out in a big way for you from him?
For sure. I mean, he's a player who works the net front extremely well, has a surprising amount of pacing skill for a guy of his size. He's a player I was higher on than most in his draft year, but I also had my reservations. I mean, the people that were highest on him had him as a clear-cut top 20 pick, like first-round pick. I was more in the kind of 30 to 40 range with him, and it's mainly because he's still very raw. He still needs a lot of experience and development. Hasn't really put together and combined his toolkit in ways that he could. A big guy that moves that well, that handles the puck that well, that can shoot it that well, and can work the net front that well. I mean, if you put all that together, it's lethal, but he hasn't yet. So I think that's the development curve with him. I think it's going to be definitely a bit longer than Noah Ostlund's. I'd say 3-4 years, maybe even 5 before he sees NHL ice. Mm-hmm. But if he's developed properly and given the time and patience to kind of work out the kinks in his game and put everything together in a cohesive package, you're looking at another really, really good home run swing for the Buffalo Sabres. It's a fantastic pick.
That's Anton Wahlberg, by the way, for those that do not know, second round pick from the 2023 draft, one of 2 second round picks from the Sabres. We'll get to the other guy because he was at the World Juniors as well. But first, I want to round out the other first round picks from the 2022 draft class. Today's episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast is brought to you by Sleeper. It is just past the halfway point of the season, and it's not going great for Sabre fans. But regardless of where we're at in the standings, I want to remind you that you could win big yourself by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper, our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you got to do, pick 8 players who record more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in a given game. And if you correctly predict the outcome of the 8-player stats, you're going to win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention, nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use the promo code Locked On. You're going to get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code Locked On NHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability of the Sabres. And let's go with the guy they picked first in that draft class, 9th overall, Matthew Savoie, who had the weirdest NHL debut ever. He made it through camp. He was injured, but then he went to Rochester in a conditioning assignment, and they got called up like, all right, guy's making his NHL debut. He played 3 minutes, and then they sent him back to juniors. It was just really strange. Maybe they were doing that to avoid the NHL being like, hey, did you guys do the injury assignment as a workaround to not send him back to junior? It was just a weird situation. But past that, what he did at the World Juniors, he also sustained an injury there. And where you see him in general, because he's back with the Winnipeg Ice. That team moved. So that team moved.
And he got traded.
He got traded. So he's all over the place. We can't keep track of him. But where do you see his game overall? And he's kind of been passed by Zack Benson, but we talked about Benson earlier. That might not be an insult to say that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, Matt Savoie is still a really good prospect, and he's actually, taking a really good step up this year. I mentioned that the last time I was here. With Matt Savoie, you're talking about a player who is really good when he's got time and space, but as soon as he has 2 players on him, it's over. Like he'll usually lose a puck. I feel like that's changed a tiny bit. His World Juniors were weird. He did a lot of really good things, and in terms of game score, so analytically, how much he was contributing to his team's production and his team's overall results, he was among the top 10 at the World Juniors in terms of forwards. But nothing was going in, nothing was working. He was taking really good shots from really good areas. The bounces weren't coming. But you look at his play right now in the WHL, he had 24 points in 11 games, 11 goals, 13 assists with Wenatchee, which is where the Winnipeg Ice moved.
Yep.
And they got traded to the Moose Jaw Warriors, which, by the way, is a fantastic move. That team's already stacked.
It's also a great team name.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And he has 5 points in his first game. So
all right.
He's doing good. Offensively, there's a lot to love. Defensively, he's never really going to give you much, but he's still able to hold his own. But yeah, the upgrades in his offensive game, his ability to handle pressure has improved a lot. So last I was here, I talked about him being kind of third in the pecking order between Ostlund, Kulich, and him in that order. I see him a lot closer to Ostlund than to Kulich now. So yeah, there's some decent improvements in his game that have taken him a long way, and I would not be surprised to see him become kind of a high-end offensive piece for Buffalo either.
All right, good to hear. On Kulich, we go. His name is pronounced differently. It seems like every week, whether he's in Rochester or he's at the World Juniors. He actually led the World Juniors in points with 13 in 7 games. I know he's older than a lot of the players at the tournament, and he continues to light the lamp in Rochester. It again, this is kind of a product, I think, of the Sabres just being so deep with young talent that there aren't a lot of spots available for him. Yeah. But it has been a little strange to me that he hasn't received more call-up chances this year. In general, his game, I don't know, like, is it developing in terms of like an overall game? Because he clearly has the ability to finish and score. But my wonder still, I guess, for him at the NHL level will eventually be about his complete, 200-foot game. So between that and what he did at the World Juniors. How do you see him?
Yeah, I still see him as a player who's going to be a staple of a middle six. And by the way, the sniping is a new development with Kulich, relatively new development. In his draft year, I saw him mainly as a really good defensive player with really good transition results, was able to skate the puck up the ice and make plays. He had a decent shot, but not to the point of scoring 16 goals in 25 games at 19 years old in the AHL. Like that's a new development. And yeah, overall, I think that adding that goal scoring ability to his game and refining it and making it better, that's a big progression in his game. But the rest of his game is also developing slowly but surely. I think it's just a matter of time for Jiri Kulich as a long-term middle six guy, playing on your second line as a complementary player or on your third line as the main play driver. If you have Jiri Kulich on your third line, you're a really good team. So yeah, I love his game.
We got one more prospect to get to from the World Juniors. Second round pick. I teased it earlier. We talked about Anton Wahlberg. He was the first of the Sabres' 2 second-round picks. The second, Maxim Strbak from Slovakia, who was over a point a game at the World Juniors. I did not get a lot of chance to see his game overall.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about with him? And also the style. The points would tell you, offensive defenseman, but does that have to be true, I guess?
No, he's really a two-way defenseman, I'd say. He's really weird when you watch him in the NCAA. He's playing with Michigan State. It's not it's a decent roster. They've got a couple of really good players, including Isaac Howard, who is a really good player for USA. They have a top draft eligible, and Artyom Levshunov on defense. They have Trey Augustine in goal, who's probably one of the best goaltender prospects in the NCAA. But, the thing with Strbak is what you saw from him with Slovakia is exactly what you saw from him in the NCAA, but except against worse competition. Because what you were seeing from Strbak was a player who makes a lot of good decisions offensively, but also a lot of bad decisions defensively, despite having really good defensive tools. So he's a player who kind of struggles with consistency in terms of his decision making, but when he's on, he's unstoppable. Throughout this whole tournament, Strbak was probably top 3, top 4 defenseman in the tournament at the World Juniors. But then in the last game that Slovakia played, he allowed, I don't remember against who it was. I think it was against Finland. Yeah, it was against Finland. 3-on-3 overtime, game on the line. He makes the most weird pinch at the defensive blue line, and the Finnish player just gets around him super easily and goes in on a breakaway and scores a goal. And as the lone defenseman at 3-on-3 with 2 players back checking but still far ahead of him, he should have identified, this is a time where I step back and hold the high slot and let the player just work around. It's 3-on-3. So he's still working on that, working out his kinks and his defensive issues. I just think that with Strbak, you have a solid chance at a player who's going to be playing kind of second pair, maybe third pair minutes, especially if that defensive decision making doesn't improve. Because when it's off, it's really, really off. I mean, I saw him cause 3 breakaways in the same shift in Michigan State. And good thing Trey Augustine's in that because he saved his butt like 3 times. But when he's off, he's off. Yeah.
Yeah. Last guy to get to that also played at the World Juniors, not a Sabre yet, and I don't know if I want him to be. Excuse me. Macklin Celebrini, going to be the number 1 pick.
Yeah.
Listen, I hate having this conversation because the Sabres continually, I pull up tankathon.com and there they are. They're not that far down the list.
Yeah.
So hopefully they play their way out of that. Let's just mention him just so that fans know. What is on the line for the bottom teams this year? It's really more for the teams like San Jose and Anaheim and Chicago, and even maybe Ottawa. But what is the future number 1 overall pick? Assuming that that's right, what did he do at the World Juniors, and what level of prospect do we have at this point in time?
In terms of level of prospect, I put him in the kind of Steven Stamkos, John Tavares, Nico Hischier type of tier of center. So not the elite generational level of a Matthews or a McDavid or those kinds of players, but the tier right below where they're still producing at high-end numbers and putting themselves in contention for awards, but never really winning them. You're looking at a player who, I've never seen a player this aggressive off the rush. He's terrifying when just barreling down the ice. Like what he'll do is he'll make a defensive play. He'll get the puck in his own zone. and just skate right at players, back them up, and put them on their heels, and just terrify them with, you don't know what he's going to do with the puck off the rush, but he's also improved his cycle game. He's able to cycle pucks really well, get in open ice, and take shots. And yeah, I mean, he's got a wicked wrister, fantastic playmaker, and again, just lethal. He just attacks you in wave after wave after wave of offensive transition, which makes him really difficult to handle for defensemen. He's going to be a really good player, and there's a significant gap between him at first and anyone else at two through whatever. Yeah.
All right. Well, again, very unlikely to become a Buffalo Sabre, but we'll see. Here we are again, where your Habs and my Sabres are just bottom of the division.
It's having a mid-off, yeah.
Just draft rankings. So better days have to be ahead.
Hopefully.
Although we've waited this long. So
yeah.
Appreciate you coming on, man. And again, you're hearing my voice. It's not all the way gone, but we're getting healthier through this winter. It's been a tough winter.
Yeah, it really has. But yeah, glad you're doing better. Glad I am as well, because goodness, that was a rough 2 weeks of COVID. That hit me hard. Yeah.
Listen, when you're using your voice for a living, like, you kind of need it. You can't losing your voice is like the worst thing that could possibly happen. But anyways, we're back at it. So thanks again, Hadi, and we'll look forward to chatting again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening, everybody, here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We will next chat about Sabres and Blackhawks, which is next up at KeyBank Center. Talk to you then, here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.